Well, what we've seen for the last 6 weeks or so is that the government, Mr. Johnson, keeps saying that he thinks he's likely to get a deal and that they're moving towards a deal. But the signs from the EU more or less seem, most of them, to say that we're not moving much towards a deal. So unless that somehow radically changes, that's what I'd expect to sort of come out from today. Although everyone sort of jumps on what other people says, and it'll take one word, one sentence out of what Mr. Juncker says and maybe ignore the next 5 sentences in order to say that he thinks we're about to do a deal. But you never know. It's always possible that there's been work behind the scenes that we don't all know about that is moving us towards a deal. I wouldn't absolutely rule it out. I think I join them to talk about the legal side of things, basically. Well, I think lawyers tend to be conservative, and the conservative approach with a small c would be to say, well, let's not upset the traditional rule that governments can choose to suspend Parliament when they like. But then the counter-argument is that government's doing more than usually suspending Parliament for just a few days here or there. It's doing it at a crucial period to stop Parliament challenging it over Brexit. The reasons it's given don't really hold up to close scrutiny, according to many people, or a hint to the press. It might just prorogue Parliament again if it can. So those are the concerns that the counter-arguments have, and maybe the judges will take them into account. Yes, advising. Well, there's lots of law happening, obviously, lots of court cases, lots of legal disputes. Well, no one can predict anything. I mean, the Supreme Court may or may not rule against the government. Labour MPs may or may not, and the DUP may or may not switch in sufficient numbers to pass a deal that may not be success in a deal. I mean, I think the more likely scenario is the Supreme Court supports the government with some limits on maybe what it can do in the future, and the government doesn't get a deal or doesn't get it passed. So we move into a scenario of whether it's really going to ask for an extension, as the law requires it to do, to ask for an extension of EU membership. I mean, no, I don't think anyone should be certain about their predictions. Well, there are people who have already gone to court to try and get the law enforced, which perhaps might mean the court itself delivering a notice to the EU on behalf of the government that is requesting an extension. It might mean civil servants are ordered to act on behalf of the government in order to request an extension. Or you could try and enforce the law directly against Boris Johnson. If he refuses, that's contempt of court, which could mean jail time. But I think that's kind of drastic. The courts are more likely to try and find a way to do it without locking anyone up.